Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Claudia Dean and hello there. So today, it's kind of casual, you know. I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm really passionate about, but I'm just apologizing in advance. I am not very glam today. It's Sunday and I thought, you know what, why not come here to the studio and film a video for you all that, as I said, I'm very passionate about. Make a mint tea and tell you guys how I really feel about a topic that I think everyone needs to be maybe a little bit more educated on. I don't think there's enough discussion about this topic, and it's something that I really believe in. So I thought I could just share that with you all today. Okay, so the topic that I'm going to be talking about is when you should go full-time, dancers that are going full-time way too young, why they shouldn't do that, and the damage that it can have for later on. So the topic we're going to be talking about today is full-time. Now, I'm really passionate about when dancers should be going full-time. I'm really noticing a trend that dancers are going full-time really young nowadays, and it's really got to the point now where I feel like I actually need to speak about this topic before I see more of it. I want to protect the next generation of dancers. I want to make sure there is a next generation of dancers, and I think the rate that we're going and the age that people are deciding to go full-time is very worrying. It's something that for me, it just needs to be addressed. So I'm going to start off by telling you a bit about my backstory, because then at least you're going to be relating to something that I personally went through myself. So when I was 15, I decided that I really wanted to go full-time. So first of all, I auditioned for my dream ballet school at the time, and unfortunately I was rejected. So then between my parents and my dance school teacher at the time, we decided on a full-time school that we thought was going to be the right fit for me. And this was when I was 15, okay? So I didn't even think about doing this any earlier. At the time, so this was about 10 years ago, I felt like 15 was actually quite young, believe it or not. So when I was kind of looking around me, I thought most people are going at 16, but I think, you know, I know that this is something that I want to pursue. So 15 just felt the right age for me personally. I don't think there was anyone around me that was going full-time any earlier. So for me and my parents and my dance school teacher, that was actually quite a big deal for me to be going full-time at 15, because there's a lot of sacrifices, which I'll go into later on, but there's a lot of sacrifices that you have to make, obviously, to take that big step of going full-time. 10 years later, I can talk to you all from experience of what age I went full-time and sort of how I felt, okay, in the time frame from 15 to when I finished my professional career. Now, looking back on it, 15 was definitely young, okay? I got to 17 where I just graduated from the Royal Ballet School, and at this point I'd been full-time for a good 15, 16, I think I was about 17 and a half actually, so 17. And for me, that was enough full-time training. I had to get into a professional environment. I knew that if I'd done any more, I would have gone crazy. So that just sort of tells you that 3 years, I think, is the maximum. And when you look at basically the professional schools, like the Royal Ballet School, English National Ballet School, all different schools around the world, you can see that their full-time studies are set up for a 3-year program. No longer, because they know that that 3 years is obviously its proven results. So that's how they work their programs. And most of those programs, they take in dancers from 16 years. That's sort of when you can apply, when you're at the correct age to go full-time. I think they make exceptions for 15 years, but as I said, that's only exceptions. Okay, so when I then finished my professional career at 21, 22, when I look back on it, I'm like 15, it definitely was young, because you're then full-time. You've got to remember, you're full-time from 15 right up until the end of your career, which can be a really long time for some people. So going full-time any earlier, it's just asking for a lot of different things, which I'll go through with you in a second, because you all need to know. What we've got to remember is for classical ballet, basically, it is a long career, and you have to be, in a perfect world, I believe, a late bloomer. So you don't want to be blooming too early, because when you bloom at 10 or 9 or 11, let's just say, you've sort of got nowhere to grow. You want to make sure that you're blooming at probably about 15, 16. You do your 2 or 3 years full-time training, and then I guess that's the perfect pathway to then step into a company. So blooming too early is definitely not ideal. I always say to dancers that, you know, it's slow and steady that wins is a race. It's not a sprint. You want to make sure you're gradually progressing into this career if that's what you want. You don't want to be going into it that fast, because at 13, you're definitely not going to be getting a contract with a company. You want to be getting that contract when you're 17, 18, when obviously you're legally and allowed to be working professionally. And I think a lot of schools in Australia, in America, overseas, we should be looking at what these professional schools like the Royal Ballet School, like English National Ballet School, all these professional schools from around the world, we should be looking at what they do and take that as an example of what we should be implementing in our training. So for me, I feel in Australia, there's just too much happening too soon. And I'll go into why I think this has sort of happened. The first reason I think this has happened is I think social media. Okay, social media is amazing, right? I'm a big advocate for Instagram, for YouTube. I absolutely love it, okay? But one thing it does, this mint tea is so good. One thing it does, it makes people feel like that they've got to be doing something that someone else is doing, because they're obviously not going to be good enough if they're not doing what that person's doing. So I think it's very easy to kind of scroll through your feed and go, oh, they're doing that. Oh, they're doing that. Oh, I should be doing that. Oh, maybe I'm not doing enough. No, remember that when you scroll through Instagram, you're only seeing the highlights of what some people's lives are, or the highlights of one dancer in the studio in that one moment. You're not seeing like the hours of training and what goes behind closed doors. You're only seeing the happy moments, the good moments, okay? And that's one thing that we've all got to remember with Instagram. What one person is doing is definitely not the answer for you. We are all so different, and everyone's got their own journey and their own way of getting to success. And unfortunately, I think social media has played a big part in everyone wanting to go full-time so young, because we see what other people are doing, and once again, we just feel like what we're doing is not adequate or not enough. And trust me, it is. So I've obviously done my research on this topic, and I've spoken to so many physios, and obviously I've based and looked at other schools around the world, as I said, like the Royal Ballet School, like English National Ballet School, and I've seen what they do from a young age, like at 10 years of age. I've spoken to dancers that have trained at White Lodge and those types of schools, and they've told me that it is very minimal. It's a very big balance between academic school and dancing. One thing you've got to remember, at 10, you should roughly be doing about 10 hours per week, and that's all. So that might shock some of you, but nowadays I honestly see 10, 9, 11-year-olds doing like 25, 30 hours per week, which to me is crazy. Like, I think this stems from us wanting to do more and be more and do better and do more than that person and do more than this. No, you got to remember your child's health and well-being and social skills is worth far more than that. You have to make sure that your child gets all that, so that when they do step into a company and they do, go on to other things later on in life, they do have the education, they know how to talk to other dancers or just other human beings, they know how to interact properly. And I think what this full-time training does from a very young age, it really affects all that. It really does. I think more than what people actually think. And I'm just going to tell you an example. Okay, let's just say if I had a little baby, okay, and they happen to be very talented at dance from a young age. I could sort of see that they had potential, and they got to 10 and they were really loving it, and they asked me, Mum, I want to go full time, I want to do what this person's doing. There is no way that I would allow my child to go full time until she was at least 15. At least 15. That is the youngest I would ever consider my child to go full time. And you've got to remember, I've had a career in this. I know what it takes to succeed in classical ballet, and I wouldn't be telling you and being an advocate of something that I actually don't believe in. So for me, I can sit here and put my hand on my heart and say, I have got your child's best interests at heart in saying that they should only be going full time at 15, no earlier. Only exception I'd say is if my child seemed to love classical ballet and had a lot of talent for classical ballet, I would consider them doing part-time at the age of 13. And by part-time, I mean maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and that would be absolutely it, because I would want my child's career to be long. So let's just say there's a child that's 10, okay, and they're looking at joining a pre-professional school at 15, 16. Now that's another 5-6 years of full-time training. it just doesn't work like that. And what really worries me is that there are like amazing dancers out there, and you can see they've got a lot of talent at 10, but because they haven't been patient and they haven't just done things slowly and steadily, basically they're going to get to 15 and it's all going to be too much. It just will be too much, because where do you then go at 14, 15 when you've been training for 5 previous years before that? That's just too long for one child to be doing that same thing day in and day out for 5 or 6 years. Too much. The other point is that there's no proof that training full-time early at 10 has actually worked for anyone so far. So this is what's really scary, is that all the professional dancers and all the big names that we hear of, like Misty Copeland, I don't know Misty Copeland personally, but she went full-time at 13. Then we've also got people like Dusty Button, and I know a little bit about Dusty Button, and I'm meeting Dusty in December, so I'm actually going to try and talk to her about this a bit more. But I read one of her interviews the other day, and she said in one of the interviews that when she was at the Royal Ballet School, that's when she went, okay, like I could really have a professional career in this, like I really love classical ballet. And that was at 15, 16, 17. And, you know, people would look at that now and say, oh, that's too late. But no, it's not. Like, that's how it's meant to go. A kid who's 10 years of age or 11 years of age isn't meant to know what they want in 10 years time. It's just impossible for a young child to make that big of decision. As I said, there's absolutely no proof that a child going full-time at 10 or 11 is actually going to work for them later on. I can't think of a professional dancer that's gone full-time like really young at 10 or 11 and has still managed to maintain a really successful career. I can't think of any at the top of my head right now. I can think of people like Misty, who started really late at 13, and she's obviously a late bloomer and it's worked for her. They're the types of people I can think of, but I just can't think of dancers that have done this from a really young age and it's actually worked. So what we've got to do is, I think we've got to base these decisions of when to go full time off research rather than what's trending on Instagram and social media, just so we protect the next generation of dancers. Once again, like, no one's got to listen to my opinion, but I'm honestly so passionate about this one topic. I just felt like I really needed to let this off my chest, because if I didn't, I'd actually feel guilty, because I just really want to make everyone so aware that this is not okay, and I don't want people to think that I think it's okay that these things are happening and what I see is going on is okay, because to me it's absolutely not. Like, I really want to be protecting the next generation of dancers. I honestly can't say that enough. Okay, and the other thing is injuries. All right, so I think a lot of people, when they hear about injuries and they see injuries, they sort of think, oh, it's not going to happen to me though. Like, I work correctly, I train correctly in class, like I'm going to be okay. But the thing is, if you're training full time so young, your body physically cannot maintain that for that long. What I find really sad is that I'm seeing 13-year-olds that I have seen previously have gone full time at like 10 or 11 and now they're 13. I've seen that they're getting all these stress fractures and stress reactions and awful things, like things that I would say like professionals should be getting, that have been training for years and years and years. No one should deserve to get an injury. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that the things that these young dancers are getting are just so serious, and I'm like gobsmacked, because I just think when I was training, there was like no way people were getting stress fractures and stress reactions and all that, and that was only 10 years ago. So I think where this has all become so muddled, it must have been about 5 years ago when it just became like this little trend that this was going to be the next thing, that kids were going to start training young so early on. I just think like we've got to protect our bodies. Our bodies, as I said, are going to be full-time from 15 to when you decide to finish your career, which, you know, might be at 21 like I did, or 22, could be at 30, or it could be at 35, it could be 40, like who knows. But you want to protect your body. You don't want to obviously get to your dream school like the Royal Ballet School and get there and get injured. It's the worst. It's the worst. Like, you wouldn't want that, because it doesn't give you the right image that you want when you're joining a professional school. Like, when you're joining a professional school, you want to have that name for being strong and never injured, and the one that can always be relied on. Like, you always want to have that name in your career and in your schooling and full-time career too. Obviously at a young age, like before 16 too, your body's trying to grow and develop. in a way. It's been proven that ballet, dance, I think gymnastics is another one, that it stunts your growth, okay? When your body's trying to change and trying to grow, and then you're impacting it with hours upon hours of ballet and full-time training, those two things just don't go hand in hand again. So that definitely can't be good for your body. And as I said, if you're really concerned about this, I would suggest speaking to a physio like I have. The effect that it has on the human body to go full-time that young just isn't what we want for any dancer. It's definitely not what we want. And I understand that there are other sports out there like gymnastics, that's the first one I can think of, where they train quite intense from a young age, but they're not then expected to have a career into their early 30s or 40s for some people. Like for ballet, that's kind of like the expectation that your training should then carry you out to about mid-30s or 30, you know, and that's when most people retire. Whereas for gymnasts, like their careers are pretty much over by the time they're 18, so that's why they can train so intense from a young age. Whereas because we're trying to do classical ballet here and maintain this wonderful career, but this doesn't happen when kids are doing this too young. It's just too much on the human body. Obviously, this is a really honest conversation. I'm sure there's teachers and I'm sure there's parents and also kids watching this right now, but I just have to say that if you have been told that it's the right thing for your child to go full-time at any age before the age of 15, you are honestly being scammed, because it is not the right thing to do. And I know this is definitely going to stir the pot, but at the end of the day, I have every dancer's best interests at heart, and I can only recommend what I know is right and what has been proven in terms of research from physios, doctors. I'm only going to recommend that because I only want to give what I believe is right for the human body. I don't want to be recommending something that I don't think works, because I know it doesn't. Never believe anyone if they try and tell you that doing that amount of hours is correct for your daughter or son before the age of 15. Never believe that that is correct, because it honestly is not right. You know, part-time is acceptable, as I said, at maybe 13, but full-time is just off the cards. Please do not buy into that. I think any person that's out there that's advertising that it's okay for a child to go full-time that young, I really worry about their intentions, and I really worry about the intentions that they have for your family, your money situation, and your child, most importantly. So please, 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 just what I'm saying, I'm just trying to educate you all. I'm just trying to make sure that you all understand the effects that it can have on kids socially, mentally, physically for later on. And I just felt really passionate about this topic, and that it was something that I was in a position where I could talk to you all about it and make more awareness of this situation. So for any dancer that's out there and you're sitting there watching this and you know you're probably doing too many hours for your age, if you have a good teacher, I would really recommend that your parents sit down with the teacher and discuss moving forward exactly what you should be doing for your age and for you to blossom at the correct time for later on. That's honestly my advice on this topic. And at the end of the day too, I want the next generation of dancers to have an education and to make sure, you know, they can stay in school for as long as possible. And I know that when you go full time, you've got to, you know, do distance education and there's sacrifices we have to make, but dancers do have a career outside of and after classical ballet too. So when their career ends, you want to have an education and you want to have something that you can fall back on, because we just don't know what the future holds for any of us. Like when I was 21, 22, like I never would have thought back in my early years that I was going to want to stop dancing at 21, 22, and all of a sudden I did, and it wasn't for me anymore, and I just wanted to do more with my life. And now I know what I wanted because I have it sitting right in front of me right now. But the thing is, if you don't have an education, if you don't have things to fall back on, that can be really hard for some people, because ballet consumes and it does become like a really big part of your life. So when it's all of a sudden taken away from you, dancers become and they feel quite lost. So it's really important that you encourage your child to have interests outside of dancing, outside of ballet, and they finish their education so they're a well-rounded person before they're a dancer. We've got to remember that we're people, we're not just dancers, we're humans. You've got to be able to talk to people, you've got to be able to have social interaction with other people too. and this is just a random example. I know this video is quite long, but I just need to let everything off my chest for you all. There were so many times in the Royal Ballet where we had these events, okay, so when there'd be an opening of a production, there would be these events after the production finished, and we'd have to talk to all the sponsors, everyone that had donated to make that production happen. We had to sit there and have proper conversation and dinners with these people. And I tell you what, I'm so glad that I had an education and that I had actually gone to school to experience how to actually talk and interact with people, because I had to have full-on conversations with people, and they're quite intimidating conversations. So I'm so glad that I'd learnt how to do that, because it was a really big part of my job as a classical ballet dancer with the Royal Ballet. Just like as well, you know, when you got to speak to your director or when you've got to speak to other dancers, like you just want to know that you can hold your ground and you can communicate with people appropriately. So that's another really big aspect. So education, so important, dancers. I know how hard it is sometimes, like we feel like we just want to dance all day, but trust me, it's most important that you get your education, because you just never know later on what you're going to want to do with your life and with your career, and that comes first. Okay, so education comes first. Next thing I'd recommend is that if you really know you want to have a career in classical ballet, 15 should be the time where you start your full-time training, because if you've got a really good teacher, you should only need 1 or 2 years of good training before you go to your pre-professional school. Any longer, it's just unnecessary. If you're really, really passionate about ballet and you're about 13 and you feel like it's something that you want to really aim for later on and you want to amp up your training, part-time's an option, but please don't get dragged down the full-time train too early. I want to protect you all. I want to educate and make sure you all understand how important this is for your bodies and for your mind for later on. Anyway, I know this video was like a little bit different to what I normally talk about, but I guess it's been on my video list for a long time, and I've honestly just like kept making so many notes on this topic. As you can see, look, there's like 2 pages worth, and it just kept building up, and I'm like, okay, I think I've got to talk about this before it gets any longer. So I'm really glad I have, and I don't mean to offend anyone. This is all my own opinions, but I guess at the end of the day, I'm looking at the next generation of dancers and where I want to see all of you go. I want to make sure that you all have an extensive career. This isn't about just joining a professional school. You want to then join a company, and then you want to also be in a company and stay in a company. I'm glad I have talked you through all this. Anyway, if you have any questions, comment below, because I'm really intrigued to hear everyone's opinions on this. I know this is going to bring up a whole lot of opinions, but as I said, this is just my opinion only, and I'm more than happy to hear everyone else's below. So comment below, and yeah, I hope you all have an amazing day, and you know the drill. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe to this video, and I will see you in my next one.